week and a half is going to be a big surge, the professionals tell us, and I think we're in good shape.
The president's coronavirus task force is recommending people continue to stay home, saying they see signs it is slowing the virus, even encouraging people to wait 2 weeks between grocery runs and limiting the number of family members who go to the store.
Fox's Lauren Blanchard. Both hospitalizations and intensive care admissions are down in New York City, but New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo cautioning against overconfidence.
We have been behind on this virus from day one, and this virus has kicked our rear end. And we underestimate this virus at our own peril.
He says orders to stay at home remain in place. The country recording nearly 11,000 deaths blamed on the virus. Great Britain facing the worst of the outbreak with its own leader, Prime Minister Boris Johnson, critically ill from it.
Johnson's condition deteriorated quickly after he was admitted to St. Thomas's Hospital for precautionary tests. In the middle of the day yesterday, he tweeted saying he was in good spirits. He was very much running the country. He was talking to his aides and reading government documents at the hospital. But just a few hours later, he was rushed to the ICU. He was now in an extremely serious condition. They do say he is conscious and he's not on a ventilator.
Fox's Benjamin Hall reports Johnson has delegated some of his decision-making authority to the country's foreign secretary. The Federal Reserve says it will purchase the loans that banks are making to small businesses to prop up the economy in an effort to smooth out some of the problems in the payroll protection program. America is listening to Fox News.
Rärnim. Paraus utsia rerewesemmer COVID-19 ika coronavirus. Förriwisom omkosap nafeten. Kope betsökkyn, kope riveriböts, me kope warnefits. Toa seriaravas pura pökköykyrä, tsöydaan ei semmun. Esa porkotsu ike tsuffegen. Esa porkapong, esa porfarropats ike kareffegen iri arabas. Kiitsi ponnautin nolim. Arapara betsökkyrä iris. Anna fava sösö, om teiso. Me ammoge kioboge biennim. Paryn faitabin. Arapara rivöts, kopo kyky vattaparravas. Torubom murira varto sirireri veirisin. Kosapattapa vesom, potum me avum. Torifitsipom meia kiattaporajan. Ei paraus, aetto seri, atski office manuelu, McCunison Resource Center, Mekkosteiserin, Choice Broadcasting. Kiriso Zabur.
Potentially hopeful signs from another country hard hit by the coronavirus.
The slowing of new infections, hospitalizations, and intensive care admissions for coronavirus in Italy has led to the head of the National Health Institute saying the curve has actually started to go down. But the figures are still alarming, they say, and Monday's death toll was 636 people. Also, developments in Milan still worry the authorities as that city's death toll doubled in the past week. Milan has now mandated the wearing of masks outside the home. There is concern with the warm spring weather and the arrival of Easter that people will start letting their guard down. 20,000 quarantine violators were fined or at least admonished over the weekend. Amy Kellogg, Fox News.
Tuesday's primary election in Wisconsin will go forward. Governor Tony Evers Monday issued an executive order to stop it, but the Wisconsin Supreme Court overruled that, saying the governor doesn't have that authority. The U.S. Supreme Court now being asked to allow an extension of absentee ballots to be accepted for an additional week. Two states which tried to block abortions during the outbreak must allow them, following two additional court rulings.
Judges say abortions in Ohio and Oklahoma do not fall under non-essential elective surgeries. The Associated Press reports the Sixth Circuit Appeals Court did not take up the argument from Ohio's Attorney General, while an Oklahoma judge blocked a portion of Governor Kevin Stitt's order to put off elective surgeries. Abortion opponents argue continuing with the procedures uses personal protective equipment now in short supply to fight coronavirus. Oklahoma's Attorney General says he plans to challenge the decision. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
A Canadian firm says it has started construction of the Keystone XL oil pipeline despite several court challenges that are still pending. I'm Jack Kellogg. This is Fox News.
Guam is home to strong and resolved people. As an island, we regularly deal with the destructive forces of nature together. We at Security Title know that when the storm passes, our families and neighbors will join together to clear the debris, to barbecue whatever is thawing in our freezers, and get back to the business of wholeheartedly living our lives. As our island struggles with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, let us remember that this too shall pass.
As we stand up to coronavirus by standing back with social distancing, Bank Pacifica reminds you that you can come to the bank without going to the bank. Use many of our other delivery platforms like online banking at bankpacific.com, accessing cash at our ATMs, shopping with our debit cards. For businesses, we have secure cash and check drop windows, and we are employing a new smarter mobile app with remote deposit capture in the next few weeks. We're all in this together, and together we will win. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots. Member FDIC.
Cocoa Coffee Company mugs are now here. Show pride for your island as you enjoy your delicious Circle K coffee. Each generously sized 16-ounce mug is etched with Guam-inspired images like Chief Gadao, Serena, Two Lovers, and many more. The Cocoa Coffee Company mug collection is available for a limited time only, so don't miss out. Get yours today and collect them all. Exclusively available at Circle K locations. A portion of the proceeds go toward the Cocoa Bird Recovery Program.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. At least as long as I got anything to say about it, real Joe Cruz.
That's right, sir.
Yeah.
It's one heck of a right hook you have there.
Yes, sir. Okay, so that's the Second Amendment. So let's go from there to Zemi Ikotny. So here we are, the editorial page of the Daily News. There's always a certain element of suspense when one looks at the editorial page of the Daily News to see whether they're going to run boilerplate from USA Today or from the Gannett News Service. Today is a little different, though. It's still not a local editorial, but it's Ari Fleischer, who is the White House spokesman in the George W. Bush administration. And he makes some good points. So even though it doesn't meet up with my high standards, I'm going to read it anyhow. Okay, here's how it goes. Reporters shouldn't try to kill off Trump's hopes. Journalists have a vital role to play in keeping our country free. But if this becomes a fight with Trump, they can't win. If President Trump is a wartime president, does that make Washington reporters wartime correspondents? Even before coronavirus, I often wondered if today's press... excuse me, I made a mistake there. Backtracking. On Tall Tales, the editorial preference has determined that the epidemic disease that we're dealing with right now is to be known as Wuhan virus. So when I run across the phrase coronavirus, COVID-19, or something like that, I use my editorial abilities here to change that nomenclature to the Wuhan virus. So let me start this again. Even before Wuhan virus, I often wondered if today's press corps had covered the Allied landing at D-Day in June 1944, if their stories would have led to the disastrous American landing on Omaha Beach, the paratroopers who dropped miles away from their targets, and the submersible tanks that sunk to the bottom of the English Channel before even touching land. Indeed, if each of these genuine military setbacks had been the lead story, the American people might have lost the will to fight the rest of the war. Which brings me to today's press corps. Since Vietnam and Watergate, the press corps has earned its chops by taking on those in power, relentlessly questioning what they are told, particularly when they're told it by a Republican president doing their best to expose mistakes, misstatements, and problems. When something goes wrong, the press shines a light on it. Now, it's not news when an airplane lands, golds the old journalistic saw. It's only news when the airplane crashes. This helps explain NBC reporter Peter Alexander's now infamous clash with President Trump over the efficacy of a drug meant to treat malaria, for which the president expressed hope that it might, not will, but might, be able to treat the Wuhan virus as well. Reporters who routinely publish worst-case estimates about the impact of Wuhan virus took a firm stand against the president's hopeful point of view, led by Alexander, who took particular umbrage. Here's a quote. "Is it possible that your impulse to put a positive spin on things may be giving Americans a false sense of hope and misrepresenting the preparedness right now?" Alexander asked. After the president again even-handedly said the drug might work and it might not, Alexander's pessimism peaked. "Nearly 200 dead. What do you say to Americans who are scared, though? I guess nearly 200 dead. 14,000 who are sick. Millions, as you witness, who are scared right now. What do you say to Americans are watching you right now who are scared?" To which the president, in his usual subtle style, replied, "You're a terrible reporter." Trump at his subtle best. Trump's approval goes up. On March 25, the Gallup organization released a poll that was good for the president and bad for the press. 60% of the American people approved of the way President Trump is handling his response to this crisis, and only 38% disapprove. But only 44% of the way approve of the way the news media is handling its response, with 55% disapproving. As the president's approval goes up, several prominent columnists and talking heads have called for the televised briefings by the president to come down. "Don't show the briefings live," cried PMSNBC Rachel Maddow, along with Washington Post's Margaret Sullivan and Karen Tumulty. In World War II, the government censored reporters. Now these reporters want to censor the government. NBC's Chuck Todd sunk to a new low when he asked Joe Biden on Meet the Press if Biden thought there was, quote, blood on the president's hands, considering the slow response. He caught himself mid-sentence and added, "Or is that too harsh a criticism?" Even Sleepy Joe thought it was too harsh, by the way. In all times, reporters have a vital role to play in keeping our country free. The First Amendment gives reporters the right to ask whatever they want, however they want. Too many journalists are fighting the last war, and they're only hurting themselves. Many reporters do ask tough, non-accusatory questions about how to fix problems, fight the illness, and get America back on its feet. But if this becomes a fight between a president who realistically presents hope and reporters who reject it, that's a fight the press can't win. Nor can we. Okay, so it's Ari Fleischer in the Daily News, and I think he's right on point, and I'm going to get to that in a local context in a minute. Now we go to the Post editorial, which is, the Daily News editorial is baked in the D.C. area, and it comes in here air freight. The Post editorials are baked right here in our own kitchens. No wonder they're so much more tasty. The title of the Post editorial today, Legislative Leadership Lacks the Will to Make Quick Decisions on Wuhan Virus Cascade Disease Prevention. In a press briefing Monday, Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes was asked, when will local senators meet to discuss and enact pressing legislation on Wuhan virus issues? Will it be soon? In a week? In weeks? The Speaker did not commit to a time frame. Barnes said something along the lines of, as soon as the legislature can work out the logistics of conducting such a meeting, like they've never had a meeting before. This is the first time they've ever done it. Okay, so if island schools and private workplaces can establish remote working, and if family members and friends can continue to stay in touch with each other through video conferencing applications, why can't the legislature? Well, I'll tell you why can't the legislature? Because the law doesn't allow for it, Guam Daily Post. I thought you knew that. But if you read the Organic Act, it does not allow for anything other than a quorum of the members being present and voting. The answer could be that there is no willingness to do so, even in this crisis. And I'd have to say that's my analysis. You'll recall that at the beginning of this legislative session, even before we stopped oohing and eyeing about the fact that we had 10 females in the legislature, that only took us about 2 months. Ooh, our legislature has 10 females in it. Ooh. I pointed out that it looked like the governor had control of the legislature. So my analysis now is this. The last thing the governor wants is senators in the legislature introducing bills that would require to do things that are not things that she wants to do, or better yet, things that she can take credit for. So the only way to stop that, because once the legislature is in session and once a bill is introduced, and especially when it hits the floor, even if the bill doesn't pass, it becomes the subject of conversation. And it's the kind of thing that reporters would ask the governor, Governor, why aren't you going to sign that bill? Or why didn't you? Or will you? And the governor, we were told earlier that the governor didn't want a meeting with certain officials to be public because she didn't want the pressure. So that's my analysis. Tina is not calling the legislature into session because Lou doesn't want her to call the legislature into session. So this is a matter of communication. And now I understand how one must communicate with the legislature, that is, with the speaker. If you want to send a message to the speaker, don't, forget about snail mail, forget about email, forget about WhatsApp, forget about Facebook or any of these other ways that we communicate, or a phone call, any of these other ways that we communicate with one another. If you want to communicate with a speaker, this is what you must do. You must get a 3x4 piece of heavy cardboard and write the message that you want the speaker to see on that cardboard, and then go down and stand in front of the legislature for a couple hours. This is now called speaker speak. This is how one communicates with a speaker. Because Jim Moylan did exactly that yesterday, and I got notice a few minutes ago, the legislature is going to meet on Thursday. So congratulations, Jim. You figured out how to crack the code and actually communicate with the speaker. All a person has to do is put that placard on and go down and stand in front of the legislature. That's the key. There were 3 people down there today, so I suppose that makes the message 3 times as strong. So the last sentence I read there, and the answer could be there is no willing to do so even in this crisis. And I think that's the inescapable conclusion, that there's no willingness to have session, that the legislature is being forced into having a session, primarily because of what Jim Moylan did. If the legislature wants senators to meet, it's possible. It's possible to meet remotely. It's not. And it's possible for them to meet even in the yard of the Congress building, 6 feet apart between each senator. They can be creative on how to talk with each other. They can probably even meet in the building. They just have to set up the 6 feet distances. We know that the governor wants us to wear masks, etc. It just wouldn't be that hard. Editorial goes on to say, but it has become apparent that it's not a question of how the senators are supposed to meet. That's not what the problem is. The problem is the legislative leadership just didn't want to meet. Not last week, not last weekend, and not as of press time on Monday. Okay, I guess that's because they hadn't had a chance to thoroughly digest the new method of speaker speak. What's holding them back is not really clear to the public, but we do know when it comes to previous life-threatening issues, the senators were quick to meet, especially when it comes to raising taxes. Okay, I'm going to stop here because I've got a caller on the line who is part of the new method of communicating with the speaker. Chris Duenas is one of the providers of the new method of speaking with a speaker that we call Speaker Speak here on Tall Tales, Chris.
Half a day, Bob, and it was a really, it really was a wonderful experience this morning. I want to express my gratitude to Senator Moylan and his leadership, and as well as Senator Luis Muñoz for joining the effort. Senator Moylan put out a call to invite others yesterday on a group chat that I'm on, and I thought this was a very appropriate thing to do. And I think you're right. I think message sent, message received. And, you know, the best thing, Bob, is people were actually not only honking and waving, but a particular doctor who I won't name, you know, actually stopped by and rolled his window down and just gave us a 3-4 minute explanation of how this means so much to him, to people he's talking to, and that, you know, he said something along the lines of what you said, Bob. I may not even agree with some of the legislation that would come out of this session, but just the fact that that everybody else is out there doing everything that they can to try to get through this together, and this legislature just showing no leadership and showing a complete void of reality. You know, just session being in there, even though, like I said, we might be careful what we wish for on some of the legislation that would come out. But the fact of the matter is, be at work, show the people that you're doing everything that you can to be a part of the solution.
Well, Chris, the only thing that is a little bit worrisome is that given the lockdown that we're under and the difficulty in getting supplies, it's going to be difficult for most people to get that 2x3 piece of cardboard to make the sign necessary to communicate with the speaker.
True that.
Because apparently that's the only way one can communicate with her.
So Jim and I were talking on the side, and he goes, "What are some of your ideas, Chris?" And I said, I agree with Bob on the fact that the body needs to meet, and some of my family members were talking to me about this as well. The use of technology, Bob, is already there. You have actually 2 floors of the legislature if you want. You have the public hearing room, which all the technology is there right now to be able to set up 7 chairs if you wanted to, 7 desks in the public hearing room, 7 desks in the main session floor room. They're basically mirror images of each other. They both have a dais. They both have all the capability of conducting business. And you could simply assemble, if you really had to, in one of those chambers for the simple vote, yay, nay, on a final piece of legislation or final pieces of legislation. It's not that hard, Bob. That's actually a huge building.
Yeah, and there's a good sized hallway there. There are a lot of ways they could do it if they wanted to, if they really wanted to do it. But obviously that's the problem. And I don't know even if I'm going to say the legislature. It's the speaker, because it's the speaker who calls the legislature into session. So the legislature really looks bad in this whole process, but the ugly face of this legislature is Tina Rose Munya Barnes, because she's the one that hasn't called the legislature into session.
I would have to concur with that observation, Bob, and simply because one of the other persons I want to recognize for her leadership was Senator Telena was on the phone this morning with Ray. And she actually led the charge, and we always give credit where credit's due. She definitely has not only reasonable legislation that the island should consider in this instance, the possibility of establishing some sort of unemployment insurance, and to fire that up. Maybe they go committee of the whole, bring all the people in to make sure that you set that up properly. You can bring people in individually instead of the whole panel. But her leadership has been demonstrated, and she's been demonstrating that since early March. I saw her on one interview on another media outlet saying perhaps she's been a thorn in the speaker's side, but that's a good thorn nonetheless.
Well, that's the senator's job, if that's what it takes. If it takes being a thorn in someone's side, if it takes being a sandwich man out in front of the legislature, that's what you got to do, right, Chris?
Good enough. In closing, Bob, on the national presentation of the Zemi Kutney from PDN, I wanted to make one other observation that I saw, and how I think it was a wonderful article by Ari Fleischer. One other observation that I thought was shameful, one of the news outlets, I think it was, I don't know how you describe them, but MSNBC with, I think it was Maddow, coming out there and basically chiding the president for an irresponsible statement on how fast mobilization can be done for the 2 ships that went to LA, I believe, in New York, hospital ships, and saying that there's no way that's going to happen in a couple of weeks. And they were in record time in those harbors providing critical life-saving care to people who so desperately need it. So then in this time, I really just, it's hard to watch sometimes. I mean, you've got to cheer for America. You got to cheer for our people in these times. And I think that there's some disgusting displays in some media outlets these days.
Right, Chris. Well, I want to thank you for coming right in here from the battle lines and giving us a briefing. Good job.
Right on, Bob. And like I said, a lot of good feedback. People smiling, thumbs up, waving. But that one drive-by, really got me. I mean, that doc was very passionate and very appreciative, and I think was emblematic of the way people are feeling. And so if session really will meet and convene, or at least meet to convene the following week on Thursday, then job done. And thank you for keeping the people, particularly with Tall Tales and everything that the Point is doing, for keeping the pressure on to make sure that the people's representatives meet and do what they're supposed to do and represent the people of Guam.
We'll keep doing it, Chris. Thanks a lot. Thanks for calling in. Okay, so one of the picketers, Chris Duenas himself. Okay, so I left off this editorial here. What's holding them back is not really clear to the public, but we do know when it comes to previous less threatening issues, the senator's quick to meet, especially when it comes to raising taxes. People are going hungry. Our Wuhan virus death toll could go up dramatically. The governor said Monday afternoon she has not heard from the legislative leadership on when they would meet. Well, that's because the governor doesn't know how to communicate with the speaker. Governor, after you give your 1 o'clock speech, get yourself a sign and go down and figure out what it is you want to tell the speaker, and get yourself a sign and go down and stand in front of the legislature. That's how you communicate with the speaker. Okay, let's take a short break here and we'll come back to Zemi Ikutni.
If you've ever struggled for breath, you know what a scary experience it is. Whether you have asthma, emphysema, COPD, lung cancer, or another respiratory illness, the right medical treatment makes all the difference. GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic has the latest technology and respiratory equipment, staffed by world-class pulmonologists. Make an appointment today with GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic and start breathing easier. GRMC, where patients are partners.
Cocoa Coffee Company mugs are now here. Show pride for your island as you enjoy your delicious Circle K coffee. Each generously sized 16-ounce mug is etched with Guam-inspired images like Chief Gadao, Serena, Two Lovers, and many more. The Cocoa Coffee Company mug collection is available for a limited time only, so don't miss out. Get yours today and collect them all. Exclusively available at Circle K locations. A portion of the proceeds go toward the Cocoa Bird Recovery Program.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Horizon Properties. You can call them at 646-7616 or 777-7792, and you can visit them at horizonpropertiesguam.com.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
Okay, before I go back into that editorial, it's time for a little levity from Ishmael Velez. What to do with Kim Jong-lu? What is the message portrayed by Kim Jong-lu? What does she expect the people of Guam to do? The island's on lockdown, but Bank of Guam remains open. You cannot visit family, but in my bank, you can come in. Distance yourself from Kim Jong-lu commands, and before you deposit your money in my bank, wash your hands. Follow the social distancing rule, keep 6 feet apart. Because disregarding what I command is not too smart. But what can we do about Kim Jong-lu? It's obvious she hasn't got a clue. Her press conference is nothing more than to confuse, but when Nick asks a question instead of an answer, she provides an excuse. But what is Kim Jong-lu to do? She can't even enforce a curfew. She has the will but lacks the authority, and garnering absolute power is her priority. To session, the senators must go and pass the bill, one that provides me with power to impose my will. Forget the Organic Act, Madam Speaker. Just use your voodoo. This I command ordered Kim Jong-un. Independent Wuhan coronavirus, a nuclear carrier in port. These must be brought to the United Nations and the World Court. They must endorse my authority from my point of view. But what do we people of Guam do with Kim Jong-un? Very interesting.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
We just got an important notice coming in from Nancy Pelosi's office.
An important announcement from
Yes.
Nancy Pelosi's
Yes, sir.
office?
Yes, sir.
Does it have anything to do with the Wuhan virus?
Yes, sir. It's a Wuhan update coming out of her office. Urgent notice. The CDC is encouraging everyone to get tested ASAP. The U.S. is taking the coronavirus very seriously. New testing methods are being done without having to leave your house. No hospital visits necessary. All you have to do is mail a stool sample to Nancy Pelosi at 1326 Longworth, Washington, D.C. 20125.
Well, that is really important news, Real Joe Cruz.
It is, sir.
You know, maybe some of our listeners didn't have a pencil handy. Can you repeat the address for Nancy
Sure.
Pelosi?
Yes, sir. I can. Please package and send those stool samples to Nancy Pelosi at 1326 Longworth, Washington, D.C. 20125.
Well, thank you very much, Real Joe
You're welcome,
Cruz.
sir.
Yeah, well, the name of the program is Tall Tales, after all, isn't it, Real Joe Cruz?
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah. Okay, back to the editorial here. The governor has proposed further measures to stop the spread of Wuhan virus. Guam's death toll could reach 700 or higher if more drastic measures aren't in place soon, according to the governor's physicians and advisory group. The senators would need to sanction the governor's plan via the passage of legislation to impose even more stringent rules on social distancing. The governor has proposed giving police and the Guam National Guard the authority to establish road checkpoints, among other plans. Vice Speaker Nelson and Senator Shelton have proposed an expanded curfew covering all adults, not just minors. Even the Speaker herself has proposed cash fines and jail time for social distancing violators. The governor needs legislative sanction to enforce these preservation efforts. In addition, there are various proposals, and some of them have been pending for more than a week now, to provide urgent assistance to displaced workers. The private sector employees on Guam have been waiting for this. Federal economic relief will be here, but it could take weeks. Guam households that are not getting paychecks now don't have 3 weeks to wait. But for some reason, these measures are held up via the lack of legislative leadership's willingness to conduct session. It's disheartening. Yeah, well, this is a real editorial, and I have no problem whatsoever in inscribing the coveted blue star on this editorial from the Post. That makes the score Post 183, PDN 57. Okay, now I want to do something a little different today, and that is I want to go to a news story that ties into the editorial from the Daily News, which you'll recall was from Ari Fleischer, and he said reporters shouldn't try to kill off Trump's hopes. And this is a story. Okay, let me hang on here. I've got our Carl on the line. Let me take our Carl, and then I'll come back to this item. Good afternoon, our Carl.
Hey, Bob. Good afternoon. I just wanted to call up and blow off a little steam here. you know the illogic of this bill, this up to $5,000 fine and 1 year in jail. Thousands of people have lost their jobs. They have no income to collect from. They're using their savings, what little they have left. So, you know, this really shows a complete disconnect. And a lot of the people that would defy the law are among those that are holding on by their fingernails and barely surviving. You know, so this is just the fact that 6 senators and staff actually proposed this, and not one of them stopped in the middle of all this creation of this bill and looked around and said, you know, guys, maybe this isn't such a good idea. I mean, that is a scary thought. It really is. Last night I was at Payless. You know, that's my one trip usually every day. I scurry out of my little rat hole and scurry to Payless and pick up a few essentials, and I scurry back to my rat hole. And while I was there, I was in one of the aisles, and there was like this 50-foot section. I don't know how long it was, but it was a pretty sizable section that was completely covered up. It was non-food items in the health and beauty aid section, and they walled it off. You know, they put up paper with a sign saying that, you know, it has been hereby decreed from on high that these are non-essential. And I was standing like 2 or 3 feet away from this. I was already in the store. What exactly is the problem with me picking up some non-essential stuff? You know, I just don't get it. I'm already there.
Well, I think I think the thinking is this, Carl. Let's say that a store has both, and you don't need the essential, but you go to the store just to get the non-essential. So if you know you can't get the non-essential, you won't go to the store.
I don't know. I just don't get that. You know, the irony of standing there and looking at this long section, and I was already there. You know, and who's to say what is essential and non-essential? You know, there are things in this was in the, you know, the same section where they would have the flashlight batteries and stuff like that. You know, I might need flashlight batteries. You know, but they have decreed that everything in this 30-foot section, 40-foot section, whatever it is this is non-essential in our judgment. And this just illustrates the frequent absurdity of the central command and control model. Because we as individuals know what is essential in our lives. They have no clue.
I have read on some of the websites that I visit from time to time that some governors and mayors, et cetera, have put that rule in place based on a sense of fairness. It wouldn't be fair to stores that sell only the essential items to have to compete with stores that sell both essential and non-essential. Put right Walmart in that blank there. So Walmart can't sell everything in Walmart because it wouldn't be fair to stores that don't have the same kind of inventory. And you're exactly right. When this is a very small taste, just a sip of what those who are interested in democratic socialism and socialism could expect if we went down that road. Silly regulations that don't make any sense because they're not market driven.
Yeah. Our favorite economist, Thomas Sowell, he was being interviewed, and he brought up something called consequential, I think he called it consequential information. And they said this consequential information is scattered among millions and millions. You know, there's like 330 million Americans and 160,000, you know, people on Guam. It's all this consequential information is scattered out among the people. And he gave this example. He said there was a plane that was landing one time. This is a true story. And it was about to touch down. And the tower radioed them frantically and told them, pull up, pull up, pull up. Your landing gear is not down. It didn't engage. It didn't drop. So they, gunned the jet engines, and they pulled up just in time. And Thomas Sowell said, that is consequential information. And all this stuff, this critical information is scattered out among the people. And people in Washington, D.C. and our legislature have this, Friedrich Hayek called it the fatal conceit, that they know there are betters, and they are the more intelligent and the more moral and the more good, so they know what is good for us, and they can dictate it from on high. But that picture that, of me standing in this aisle, it just really, to me, illustrated the absurdity of it, that this small elite group, especially in socialist countries, know what's good for the sometimes hundreds of millions of people scattered out in cities and the countryside over across entire countries. It's just wacky. It really is. Anyway, Bob, thank you for allowing me to share my little story there, my little...
Andrew has a solution to the dichotomy that you suggest, Carl. Andrew says that the non-essential goods should be available only to non-essential employees of the government of Guam. And that,
Andrew, he makes me laugh quite a lot. That's a good observation.
So apparently the touchstone nowadays as to the worth of a person is whether or not he is non-essential. Thanks for calling, Carl.
Oh, thank you, Bob. I appreciate it. I'll keep listening. It's another great show.
Okay. So I was just about to get into this article by May Habib that ran in PNC last night. And it deals with Michael San Nicolas's chat with Jim Moylan, Mary Camacho, and Tina Rose Munya Barnes. And I'm going to get to this later on in the card. Michael San Nicolas came close to accomplishing what Jim Moylan finally accomplished. He at least got 3 senators together to talk about what the problems are with our island, something that Tina was not able to do by herself. So San Nicolas has a 2-pronged solution. I'm not ready to rule on it yet. I do have a general ruling on it, and it's a thumbs-up ruling because it shows that somebody who we've elected spent some time thinking about the problems that we have, doing a little bit of theoretical or hypothetical modeling, and tries to come up with some solutions. And I think that's great. That's actually what our governor should be doing, instead of coming up with executive order after executive order, which she finally realizes she can't enforce without legislation. So I'm going to go through this article, and I'm going to point out a couple of things that are right in the same ballpark as what Ari Fleischer talked about in the Daily News editorial. Here it goes. Michael San Nicolas on Monday laid out his suggestions for getting Guam residents federal Wuhan virus economic payments or unemployment assistance as soon as 1 week from now. Next sentence. But it seems those he's included in the suggestions aren't actually ready to sign on. You know, there's a huge difference between starting a sentence with but and starting a sentence with and. When you start a sentence with but, that raises the flag, I'm contradicting what I just heard. Okay, well, you know, that's a good idea, but. So she hardly gets into the story, and she raises the red flag of a but. Well, that's B-U-T, not B-U-T-T, just to make sure everybody knows. especially the real Joe Cruz, after that special announcement that he just made about the Wuhan virus test and Nancy Pelosi. I think I better make it very clear for him.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So she goes on to say, but it seems those included in the suggestions aren't actually ready to sign on. Well, they're suggestions. He made that clear. If you listen to that conference they had, these are just suggestions. So, you know, starting out and turning it 180 at the very beginning. Goes on to say the Congressman invited only Speaker Barnes and Republican Senators Torres and Moylan, along with the media, to his online conference Monday morning, where he outlined 2 possible avenues. So he only invited 3 senators. So we start out with a but, and then we go to an only, and then she outlines the solutions, a public solution under which the okay, we're coming up on a break here. I'm going to come back. I think I can finish this before the big halftime show and then get into the card.
One of the easiest ways to prevent the spread of COVID-19 is to wash your hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Let this message help you time it. Start soaping up now. The virus can survive in the air for 3 hours, on copper for 4 hours, on cardboard for 24 hours, and on plastic and stainless steel for 72 hours. Disinfect phones and common household surfaces like tables, doorknobs, light switches, countertops, toilets, faucets, and sinks, desks, including computer keyboards and kids' toys. Choice Broadcasting reminds you to stay safe and stay clean. You can rinse now.
Family Finance has been serving the people of Guam since 1959, and they'll continue to be there for you in the years to come. Whether you're looking to get a personal loan for that summer vacation or paying off those long overdue bills, Family Finance has got you covered. Apply for a personal loan from $1,000 up to $3,600 by calling Family Finance in Agutya at 475-4545, Upper Tumon at 647-5626, or in Dededo, 633-4473. Family Finance, serving the people of Guam since 1959.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Security Title, providing solutions for complex real estate transactions.
Okay, so back to this news story by a new reporter, new to the island, named May Habib. And the story goes on, talks about the first public solution under which GITA would sign an agreement with the Gov Guam Pension Fund to buy a bond. In essence, that would be guaranteed by the government with interest paid back to the pension fund by the $10 million coming to Guam for local war claims. They require a 7% annualized rate of return on their investments, a minimum of 7%. So $10 million at 7% interest would provide capitalization of $142.8 million, San Nicolas said. I got to work with my Facebook here for a second. Yeah, let me go on with this. I'll just have to hang on to the Facebook comments for a minute. With a minimum one-time benefit for eligible adults sitting at $1,200, San Nicolas said that would mean around 116,000 Guam residents could apply for this advanced payday loan of sorts. The congressman said the retirement fund is the only public entity on the island with enough capital to fund this agreement with GITA. The way we can roll out that program is that the legislature would authorize GITA to be able to give out economic impact loans. GITA would set up an application portal online that would include the applicant uploading a picture or file copy of their 2018 or 2019 tax return. That would be the proving document that the applicant is qualified for the funds, San Nicolas said. He added that as part of that application, local residents would authorize their federal payments to go directly to Gita, which can then pay back the pension fund with interest. So this is not a whole lot different than the idea that the governor had to pay the war claims, get the war claims money in people's hands a little faster. This time, the idea would be that the bond would be floated. Let's see, actually the money would be borrowed from the retirement fund. Now, like I said, I'm not ready to rule on these things. And as a matter of politics, anytime you mention taking money from the retirement fund for anything, you're running into a political firestorm. There's no question about that. But what I want to emphasize here is that St. Nicholas came up with an idea. And nobody else is engaging in that worthwhile pursuit, which is what we need right now. We need some ideas. And my own idea, my own personal preference when it comes to ideas is that the way to have good ideas is to have a lot of ideas and junk the bad ones. That's my approach to it. But what ideas have we seen coming from the speaker and the governor? None. Nothing at all. Except the governor cranks out executive order after executive order and then finally decides, hey, I don't have the authority to do this. I need legislation. And then the speaker comes up with a bill that I will explain later on is a nonsense bill. It doesn't do what the governor thinks she needs. So St. Nicholas comes up with his idea, and if it worked, it would give the retirement fund a 7% in return on investment, which, given the volatility of today's stock market, that's not too bad. The second option would have the same structure, but with local banks funding these bridge loans. St. Nicholas said this bank option is less complicated than the one with Gita and the pension fund. Now, here's the thing. So St. Nicholas laid this out. He pointed out that his role here is on the Washington end, not on the Guam end. That he would be available, he would have the ability to work with the bureaucracy in the District of Columbia, but the rest of this stuff is on the Guam end. Tina Rose Munya Barnes asked him at one point, well, are you going to bring the retirement fund and the banks in and explain this to them? And St. Nicholas said, no, that's your job. That's a local matter. So here's May Habib. After explaining the two ideas, this is what she said. St. Nicholas admits none of these entities, Gita, the local banks, or the pension fund, have been spoken to or have any explicit buy-in in either of his suggestions. So why is that important? That's the same thing that Ari Fleischer is talking about. St. Nicholas admits. So to say admits, it's, admits is kind of a first cousin of confess. So he confesses that the Gita, the retirement fund, he hasn't spoken to them about it. Well, as he pointed out, it's not his place, but I can understand his frustration. He's in D.C. He has the ability to coordinate with the bureaucracy in D.C., but he doesn't see any thought process going on out here at all. He doesn't even see a legislature in session. Okay, I'll come back to this right after the big halftime show, finish it up, and go on to the card.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Critical week ahead. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. That assessment from President Trump at Monday evening's coronavirus task force briefing. Some calling for a national stay-at-home order, the president deferring.
I can do it, but it is a constitutional. You can say federalist. You can say there's lots of different reasons where I would rather have the governors do it, make their own determination.
The president said there are 10 different drug therapies now in active trials, 15 more beginning clinical trials. New York State reporting a drop in both hospitalizations and the patients admitted to intensive care units. South Carolina later today will become the latest state to put restrictions on its citizens to try and slow the spread.
Governor McMaster announced,
I'm issuing a mandatory home or work order.
McMaster says starting at close of business Tuesday, everyone should stay home unless
they're working, they're visiting family, or recreating outdoors, unless they're obtaining necessary goods or services, and those are the limits.
Violators may be fined or disciplined. McMaster says the order is meant to encourage social distancing.
Fox's Gernal Scott. Of the 368,000 coronavirus infections in the country, 2,200 of them are reported in South Carolina. The state has seen 48 of the country's nearly 11,000 deaths. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson remains in the intensive care unit of a London hospital after being unable to shake a high fever days after he tested positive for the virus. Doctors say he is not on a ventilator. The highest-ranking Catholic Church official to be charged with sexual misconduct, freed after serving more than a year in prison. Australia's Supreme Court overturning the sexual abuse convictions of Cardinal George Pell. Asian stock markets closing Tuesday sharply higher, and Dow futures are surging more than 300 points. America is listening to Fox News.
As a GovGuam designated urgent care center, FHP Urgent Care is here for your urgent medical needs. Go to FHP Urgent Care instead of going to the hospital during this COVID-19 pandemic. FHP Health Center operates Saturdays through Thursdays, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and is closed on Fridays. FHP's Cancer Center, Adult Medicine, and Pediatrics Department are also open for limited services and availability. FHP Home Health Department is open to care for patients at their homes. Call 646-5825, extension 8174. FHP, our island, your clinic.
Social distancing math. Tossie is infected with COVID-19. She still goes out because she and her friends think it doesn't affect them. Tossie infects 3 friends. Each one infects 3 more. In 30 days, 244 people are infected, including someone's Nana. Most recover, but Nana dies. Reduce your social contact. If you only infect 1 person, in 30 days, the virus spreads to only 4 people. Stay home, stop the spread, save lives.
President Trump considering a second coronavirus task force, this one to deal with the economic ramifications.
We built the greatest economy in the world. We got artificially stopped by a virus that nobody ever thought possible.
President Trump again did, as he is wont to do, promote the economy, even amidst a historic downturn thanks to a pandemic no one could have predicted. But if you're starting to get the sense that there could be brighter days ahead, and soon, well, you're not alone. It's a sentiment shared by Wall Street, optimism that sent stocks soaring in part thanks to signs that lockdowns in the U.S. and Europe may be helping to slow the pandemic. All 3 major indices finished sharply higher for the session.
Fox's Kevin Corke. Congressional leaders starting to sketch out the next round of economic stimulus. House Speaker Pelosi estimating it'll have to be at least $1 trillion. The president suggesting major infrastructure improvements be a part of that. Polls in Wisconsin will open in 5 hours from now. An attempt by Governor Tony Evers for a last-minute delay in today's state primary overturned by the Wisconsin State Supreme Court, ruling the governor didn't have the authority to change the date. A grim search of the Chesapeake Bay is now half over.
Officials say they found the remains of Maeve Kennedy Townsend McKean, her body found in about 25 feet of water in the Chesapeake Bay. She and her 8-year-old son Gideon went missing after an apparent canoe accident Thursday. The small craft reportedly overtaken by strong winds. Maryland Natural Resources Police say the body was found about 2.5 miles from the home of her mother, former Maryland Lieutenant Governor Kathleen Kennedy Townsend. The search is still on for the child. Jill Nato, Fox News.
Detroit baseball fans mourning the death of the slugger known as Mr. Tiger, Al Kaline, dead at the age of 85. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
As we stand up to coronavirus by standing back with social distancing, Bank Pacific reminds you that you can come to the bank without going to the bank. Use many of our other delivery platforms like online banking at bankpacific.com, accessing cash at our ATMs, shopping with our debit cards. For businesses, we have secure cash and check drop windows, and we are employing a new smarter mobile app with remote deposit capture in the next few weeks. We're all in this together, and together we will win. Bank Pacific. Brothers but branches, we place roots. Member FDIC.
Guam is home to strong and resolved people. As an island, we regularly deal with the destructive forces of nature together. We at Security Title know that when the storm passes, our families and neighbors will join together to clear the debris, to barbecue whatever is thawing in our freezers, and get back to the business of wholeheartedly living our lives. As our island struggles with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, let us remember that this too shall pass.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
So we finished up another one of those gigantic halftime shows to a completely empty grandstand, but we're going to keep on doing it. That's Tall Tales. So I'm going to finish up this this criticism of this PNC story, but before I get back into that, do you have any more urgent announcements, Real Joe Cruz?
Not at this time, sir.
That's good.
I'll let you know.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Yeah. Maybe you can hold on to them until after 6.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Oh, okay, here's from Andrew. Who knew Jim's placard would peak? Tina's mood so troubled and bleak. A short and sweet session will cure your depression. We'll even use speakers speak. That's the poet laureate of Tall Tales. Okay, so, yeah, so May made a big deal out of here. You know, the bankers didn't buy into it, and nobody else had signed on to it. And of course, that wasn't the point. The point was, at least as far as I could tell, that he thought that somebody ought to do something, some elected official ought to do something. And then May goes around and collects, I can imagine the questions that May asked. Melanie Mendiola, the director of GITA, told PNC that nothing is currently in the works. Of course not. GITA wasn't consulted. Well, we knew that. So what kind of leading questions did the reporter use to get an answer like that? What is your position on, well, we weren't consulted. The Banking Association President Ed Untelan also says this is the first time he heard of this. Well, it's the first time that anybody heard of it. And the plan would need to go through the right channels. First, to review logistical and regulatory. Well, yeah, I guess so. The congressman insists that there are several steps to getting the local program set up. They'll be faster than the federal dollars and even quicker if senators decide to pursue the bank option. He says, I know how fast our legislature can work with very talented people on their staff side. Well, I was with them right up until that one. So I really think that the mandate can be crafted within 24 hours if everybody burns the midnight oil. The legislature can go into session and get it passed, and the banks can get to work getting the application up to the website. So I think between the two options, the fastest one would be the private option. I think that 1 week is something that we can do. The congressman is suggesting the weekly unemployment benefits roll out the same way, with banks or GITA paying out a certain amount that would eventually be backfilled when the White House program kicks in. While senators on the conference call had varying questions for the congressman, they all agreed to explore those options more thoroughly. Now, why hadn't they explored those options before? Anybody have an idea? I have an idea why they hadn't explored those options before. They hadn't thought of those options before. Real Joe Cruz, I just lost my stack VIP.
Phil Flores, sir, line 1.
Okay. I'll be with you in just a second, Phil. I got to get this. I can't. What's the login, the user again, Real Joe Cruz? While senators on the conference call had varying questions for the congressman, they all agreed to explore these options more thoroughly. And again, my question is, why hadn't they explored those options before? Explored them and maybe even rejected them? And the answer is because they hadn't thought of those options. They hadn't thought of any options at all. So San Nicolas at least chummed the waters and gave them something to think about. Now, and here's the next example. Governor Lilian Guerrero would not comment on San Nicolas's proposal. At her daily news conference, the governor said she was not informed or engaged on the matter. She did say, though, that her team is looking at a different program that could provide financial support for the local community, but did not share any further details. So I want to make 2 points here. One, I read the coverage of the other three media outlets. None of them had the same Ari Fleischer type approach. You know, they didn't talk about what San Nicolas admitted. And there was no but in the second paragraph. So that's the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make is this, that San Nicolas made it known that whatever option is pursued, he's prepared to do with it what it needs to be done at the Washington level, and the rest of it is up to the local folks. So I don't know this, but if I were him, I would be very frustrated, because I would be tuned in on all these people who are saying, I can't go anywhere, I can't work, I don't have any money, I don't have any money coming in. I hear about this money coming from Washington, but nobody can tell me how long or when, and I don't know if I can hang on that long. So what do our great thinkers here on the island come up with? Well, Tina had a great idea. We'll put the legislature on strike. That way no one will have to think about anything at all. And the governor had a great idea. I'll crank out executive orders that I don't have the ability to enforce. So San Nicolas, whether his ideas are good ideas or bad ideas, at least they're ideas, and he's tossed them out on the table, and he's got people thinking about him and talking about him. He's got bankers and retirement fund, etc. They may not like it. They may think these ideas are not good ideas, that they're not practical, etc., and they may not want to go along with it. But how did, I wonder how the bankers in the retirement fund felt about Tina's ideas or Lou's ideas. So, Phil, I'm wondering what you thought about Tina's ideas about getting money in people's hands.
Okay, first of all, I'm in my car. Are you able to hear me?
I can hear you 5 by 5, Philip.
Okay, thank you very much. I know what you're getting to, and I'm getting, the Bankers Association met this morning. We're meeting, I guess you call it digitally, virtually a lot, try to do this whole thing. And we appreciate what the delegate did. And I feel the same way as you, RK, that he came up with an idea. He's being creative. We, the Bankers Association, that he's trying. What this idea is, perhaps, is not the one that can be acted upon, but we're welcoming all ideas. And I don't fault Mike for coming up, the congressman for coming up with this. And if we'll be transmitting something to him tomorrow and saying, look, we'll work with you on anything because we all want to help our island. And I'm not running for office, but I still say that. We all want to be here working for our island.
That's good, Phil.
Thank you very much. I don't know. Legislature, from what I understand, is going in a special session on Thursday. I think a lot of people are in shock, and you don't have to be out of office. You can be in office to be in shock. And we're going to work through this, RK. We'll get it done. I know a couple of people who knew people got stopped on the way to work this morning, like, where are you going? And that might be a little bit heavy-handed, but we're going to be okay.
Well, I think so. If we hook our brains up, not in parallel, but in series, so that we kind of get a multiplier effect out of all of the thought processes that we can bring to bear on these problems. But if we all kind of sit around and look at things only out our own front windows, it's going to be a lot more difficult. And that's why I
agree.
I applaud what St. Nicholas did, and he's got you guys thinking, right?
Yeah, I applaud what he did, and in the Bankers Association, I think a lot of people, collaboratively, you're going to, more. What is it? Two heads are better than one, except at a guillotine. And I think group thinking is good right now. Just try to be creative. I find that, like what we're doing a lot is just to keep people to have the faith, not be scared because they don't know what's going on and they're not seeing any solutions. And so if the delegate comes up with a solution, whether it's workable or not, but you're right, at least he's thinking. And, we salute him for that. And I'm the diehard Republican. He's a Democrat. I still have to say that. And I say that as also one of our companies being Bank Pacific. The bankers can't do what he was thinking, but at least he made us think about what he was thinking.
Yeah, well, very good. Thank you very much for that comment, Phil, and I'm really glad that you found time to call in, Tall Tales. I know you're a Tall Tales fan, buff, supporter.
I am a Tall Tale fan.
Yes, sir. Okay. It's always a pleasure, Phil.
And RK, maybe people don't know why I call you RK. But anyway, the problem is today, and my biggest, my thought is that I listen to you on the way home from my office, and nowadays there are no cars on the road, so I don't have enough time to listen to you.
Yeah. 'Tis an ill wind that blows no one good, right, Phil?
I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, always a pleasure, Philip. Okay, let's see. I've got, I lost my stack VIP again. Who have I got here?
Let me give you a clue.
Okay. Oh, les hommes de Franchi.
Oui, oui.
Good afternoon, Frenchie.
Yeah, as I told Joe before, if he wants to wee-wee, it's the second door on the left. Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, you guys are doing a very good impersonation of Pepe Le Pew, and Joe keeps amazing us with his voiceover abilities. You know.
He does.
So anyway, you might know already that I have a little sarcastic bent, but I was laughing.
If you didn't, Frenchie, we wouldn't look forward to your call so much. That's part of the shtick on Tall Tales, right?
What had me going laughing all afternoon was actually that phone call from the delegate, because in politics, vengeance is a dish you eat cold, and I think he waited a few months, but he had an excellent opportunity to give back to Lou what she gave to him with the war compensation act that they finally passed, and basically he's serving it back to them with good intentions, with the fact that he understands that things on Guam go slow, and if nothing is done, it could be months before anybody gets the federal money that he's worked quite hard, actually, trying to get going, since he is himself on the, I think, on the financial committee in the House. So it's interesting. I thought, well, that was a smart move, because what is good for the goose is also good for the gander. And so how is Lou going to oppose this? Well, she was pushing it for the Mamamco, and then she's not going to push it for the poor people on the island that really need that cash right now. Not they need it yesterday, not a month from now. So I was really laughing. I said, well, he plays chess pretty well, and then now it's down on the lap of the senators, and we're going to see all those contraction of faces, like if they have a bad case of constipation. I mean, it's going to be quite interesting to watch them.
Are we back to the real Joe Cruz's urgent announcement, Frenchie?
Yeah. Well, that happens. Yeah, but you know what they say about crap sticks to the wall. So, so it's good. That was my little remarks today. I was thinking, wow, this is interesting. We have a delegate that's more Republican than most of the Republican senators, and certainly more than the previous governor, and he's a Democrat, and that's kind of interesting to see how those things work.
Indeed it is, Frenchie.
Yeah. Well, that's all what I had for today.
Okay.
No ranting and raving otherwise, just enjoying myself looking at fools making fools of themselves even more.
Okay, Frenchie, thank you for calling. Okay, au revoir, Frenchie. Yeah, all right, where was I here? Oh, yeah, I finished up with, I think I finished up with that. Took a long time to get through Jimmy Cotney. Now I go to the card, and I've only got a couple of things on the card. I start out with Stay Home versus Poker, which is a short one. And then I've got the Secretary of the Navy, Thomas Mobley, the acting Secretary of the Navy, versus Thomas Mobley versus the Chain of Command. And then I've got Lou and Tina versus Michael San Nicolas and Jim Moylan. And then some old ones like Helen Middlebrook versus Perceived Wisdom, Andrew and Bill O'Reilly versus Big Government, and the Vigilance Committee versus Lou. So let me jump right in here with Stay Home versus Poker. Now Lou is on TV every day saying, stay home. And she's cranking out all these executive orders. And yes, I think the limiter yesterday was You can not leave your house in a group larger than one. So no matter where you go, you better be by yourself. And that applies everywhere on the island except one place, poker games in Molessu. Now, that's not in the executive order. Maybe a new executive order will come out and clarify that. But there was a story on KUAM yesterday. Governor's driver, cop, and Adelude staffer, among others, not following social distance order. The governor's driver, a cop, and an Adelude staffer. And there was a picture that probably I'm sure you've seen it, Real Joe Cruz.
I have, sir.
Yeah, I suspect everyone has seen it. It's there's a series of pictures with people around a professional poker table. This is not a card table or a leftover kitchen table or something. This is a real poker table. People sitting around, chips, cards, poker, and a large crowd, cops in uniform. Yeah, it's all there. So here's a comment from Janella Carrera. It was dumb, dangerous, and stupid. Okay, she's sounding like she wants to be the Secretary of the Navy. It was dumb, dangerous, and stupid. We are working to ensure everyone involved is in home quarantine. Adelude spokeswoman Janella Carrera's response on viral pictures circulating that show a large crowd gather very closely around poker tables. People are not, in the pictures, are not 6 feet apart. Some familiar faces in those pictures. Adelude staffer Stephanie Flores. Stephanie Flores, an Adelude staffer, was in the picture. Guam police officers Kurt and Pete Sanchez. What was the second guy's name?
Who, sir?
First base.
Kurt
and Pete.
Pete. Oh.
Yeah, Pete Sanchez. I didn't think I'd have to repeat, but I did. Yeah. They're cops and several Judiciary of Guam marshals. Officer Pete Sanchez is the governor's driver. Well, maybe he didn't know about the executive orders. Sources tell KUAM the pictures were taken after a double funeral in, I'm sorry, I said Molessu before, after a double funeral in Humatak. The pictures were staged to recreate things the deceased liked to do with family members, according to sources. Does that matter? Does that make it any difference at all? Okay, so that's what happened. So the Stephanie Flores, a couple of cops, Kurt and Pete Sanchez, were in this picture standing, as Ray Gibson said this morning, cheek by jowl. And he said in his entire 45 year of broadcasting, he'd been looking forward to using that phrase on the radios. So he finally got his chance. And there they are, cheek by jowl. Yeah. Okay. I don't have any jowls. I never had any jowls. I don't ever want to have any jowls. But I recognize a good pair of jowls when I see them. Okay, so that's the setting. So would the public be interested in this when the governor's driver is in one of these impermissible crowds, when she is hammering so hard on this idea of social distancing? Would the public in general be interested when Stephanie Flores, who's a governor's staffer, is involved? You better Hong Kong believe it. So wouldn't you expect a forthcoming announcement from the governor's office, from the governor herself, actually? This is serious. How can you expect anybody else to pay any attention to what you want them to do if you're not doing it yourself, Governor. Well, here's the official Adeloop response. When asked if any Adeloop staff in the picture would be disciplined for violating the governor's directives, Carrera said, quote, "We don't comment on personnel matters." You know, this really gets old. Do you comment on operational matters involving the government, Janella? Do you comment on people who completely disregard the social distancing matters? This is such a cop-out. You know, and Janella's, according to the staffing pattern, I think Janella's making $75,000 a year. $75,000 a year, and you know, for this kind of handling of the press. It's really disappointing. Okay, I'm going to put this aside. We're going to go to the seventh inning stretch, and I'm going to come back to the Secretary of the Navy versus the chain of command.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point. One of the easiest ways to prevent the spread of COVID-19 is to wash your hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Let this message help you time it. Start soaping up now. If you're sick or caring for someone who is, wear a surgical mask or N95 respirator when you're around others. If you're not sick, wear a washable cloth face covering in case you're an asymptomatic carrier. Don't touch the front of the mask and always remove it from the back. When you cough or sneeze, use a tissue or your upper sleeve, not your hands. Choice Broadcasting reminds you to stay safe and stay clean. You can rinse now.
GRMC's cardiology department treats most complex heart problems. In our catheterization lab, cardiologists use imaging equipment to treat clogged arteries that can cause heart attacks or heart failure. We perform balloon angioplasty, stenting, and other life-saving cardiac procedures. If you suffer from a heart condition, have your provider refer you to GRMC's cardiology clinic at 645-5500. GRMC, where patients are partners.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Horizon Properties. Call 646-7616 or 777-7792. You can also visit them at horizonpropertiesguam.com.
Okay, so here we are in an empty Wrigley Field. Nobody in the stands, nobody on the field. Even the TV crew has gone home, but we still do the seventh inning stretch here on Tall Tales. Tall Tales is tradition bound, right, Real Joe Cruz?
Sir, yes, sir.
Very good. Good answer, Real Joe Cruz. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Acting Secretary of the Navy Thomas Mobley versus the chain of command. And I'm going to start out, I'm going to go through this kind of in a chronological fashion, but I'm going to start out giving some free advice to Acting Secretary of the Navy Thomas Mobley. Tom, if you want to grab a microphone and go into a long, irreverent rant, be a talk show host, because then you could do it every day, and you can even get paid for it. It works for me. But if you don't want to be a talk show host and you want to be a Secretary of the Navy, that is not the way to go. So let's go back a few days. You'll recall that the Teddy Roosevelt, which I guess sailors refer to as the Big Stick. You know why they call it the Big Stick, Real Joe Cruz?
I don't, sir.
Teddy Roosevelt, when he was president of the United States, once upon a time was asked, Mr. President, what is your foreign policy? What should the United States posture be when it deals with foreign countries?
Okay.
And Teddy said, we should walk softly, but carry a big stick.
Yes, now I remember, sir.
Yeah.
I've heard it before, yeah.
Yeah. So the Big Stick pulled in here because it had some sick sailors. They were stricken with the Wuhan virus. They tied up at naval base, no longer naval station, and some of the sick sailors were taken to naval hospital, and and that seemed to be the plan. But then the captain, the CO of the Big Stick, wrote a letter up the chain of command saying, this isn't working out very well. You got to take the crew off the TR so that we can deal with the Wuhan virus. We're not at war. No sailor should die because of the way we're dealing with the Wuhan virus. Well, he not only sent it up the chain of command, but that letter also found its way to the San Francisco Chronicle. Okay, I got my Stack VIP back. Okay, I'm going to stop here for a moment. I guess another Joe probably wants to talk about something that I've already gone past. So, good afternoon, another Joe.
I'm sorry. It was an entertaining story. I think I wanted to touch on really quick was because Uncle Bob was regarding. I think I heard word of mouth was there's going to be a session this Thursday, the 9th.
Yes, after Jim Moylan finally figured out how to communicate with the speaker, there's going to be a session on Thursday.
Okay, so and then my understanding is they're possibly going to broadcast it the same way that they usually broadcast it. So that's positive. I'm kind of curious how long it's going to take for them to iron out the details regarding the Department of Labor, but I think we'll hear more about that during session, hopefully.
Well, we're not going to hear about it out of session, that's for sure, because they aren't going to do anything with it.
It's true. So there's going to be all sorts of different questions posed, and hopefully everyone's different situation gets addressed. Presuming that there's going to be different ways to get assistance or different categories, whether you're self-employed, formerly GovGuam employed, formerly federal government employed, whatever it is your background, employment background was. Is it fair to say this is labor law, Uncle Bob, or is it something totally different?
Did you say labor law?
This economic.
No,
COVID,
this is not labor law. Paying people that are out of work it's not labor law.
What? It's totally different.
Well, what it amounts to is wealth transfer law. When you're talking labor law, you're talking things about working conditions, wage and hour, unions and management, OSHA, safety, etc. You're not talking about ex gratia payments to former employees.
Oh, but they do require you to provide information on former tax I want to say returns, but it's not, the filing taxes and certain information about each individual they're going to require. That does that is regarding former employment. Is that true?
Well, that's what, I don't think anybody knows the whole thing from front to back. We've seen little bits and pieces and snips and snaps. These are some of the things that have been aired, but, we don't have the complete picture of how it's going to work just yet.
Hey, Bob, I'm gonna let you continue with your informative story there, because I think we're not gonna know have any more intelligent questions until we see them in session. So thanks for your time, Bob, and please continue your story about the experience of the commander on the big stick.
I'll do it. Thank you, Another Joe. So that's Another Joe wondering about the money coming to folks who have lost their jobs. Okay, so I was talking about Acting Secretary Navy Thomas Mobley. Brett Crozier wrote a letter expressing his, at least I could say, dissatisfaction with the way the Navy was dealing with the crew of the Big Stick. He wanted to see the crew of the Big Stick taken off right away. Now, when this all came up, I did my usual speculating. And one of the speculations that I presented, and I don't know if there's any validity to this or not, it may very well have been that the Navy brass had made a decision, we're only going to take 6 sailors off that ship. Everybody else is going to stay on board. We're going to develop crowd immunity, and we're going to continue to maintain that the Big Stick is ready to sail at any moment. And if that had been the situation, the reason for it would be that we have an enemy called China, who is probably really happy that the Teddy Roosevelt is now run aground on its own, on the coffee grounds of the kitchen of the galley, because it takes one carrier out of action and the other one at Yokosuka has a Wuhan virus problem also. So that may have been what the Navy had in mind. Another speculation was that the Navy had a plan to evacuate the crew, but it wasn't happening fast enough for Crozier, so he wrote his letter. So he wrote his letter up the chain of command. He didn't discuss it with his immediate superior, which is the Strike Force commander, who is on the Teddy Roosevelt right now and just down a short passageway from Crozier's compartment. So he skipped over his superior and sent it up the chain, sent out something like 20 or 30 emails, one of which fell into the hands of the San Francisco Chronicle, which took it public, caused a lot of embarrassment for the Navy, caused a lot of alarm for the crew and family of the Teddy Roosevelt, but it got the Navy to move. The Navy right away said, okay, we're gonna work out a deal so we can get those sailors into hotels on Guam. Now, the Navy's official position is that they had been working with the governor before Crozier's letter to do that very thing. So that's the background. But when you come down to it here, the really important consideration in a military background is not was Crozier right or was the Navy right or did the Navy do the right thing or the wrong thing. The key word here is chain of command. A military officer in a chain of command communicates with the person above him in the chain of command, and he does it in a particular way. He doesn't do it with an unsecured email. Even if he were reporting to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, he wouldn't use an unsecured email. And he would take all kinds of steps to make sure that his communication didn't leak. Well, that's what happened. And because of that, Acting Secretary of the Navy Thomas Mobley relieved Captain Crozier of his command. Not a surprise, because Crozier must have gone into this with his eyes wide open. He must have gotten the result he was looking for, knowing that he would pay a pretty high price for getting that particular result, a potentially career-ending event, as it were. So that's where it went. Crozier was relieved of his command on the day that he left his ship. His crew gathered together on the hangar deck of the ship as though they were at a poker game in Humatic. That is, there were a couple of thousand sailors that were, as Ray Gibson would describe it, who were cheek by jowl with one another, increasing the possibility of communicating the virus to somebody else. But they cheered for him. He must have left there with a really warm feeling in his tummy. I don't know if that was enough to balance out being relieved of his command, because in the Navy, if you're relieved of your command, that's the end of your career. You're going to go from commander, the CO of a carrier, to maybe the chief bosun mate on a rowboat or something like that. Your career is basically over. And anyone who packs the gear to become a captain of an aircraft carrier has to have some possibility of becoming, at least has to entertain the dream of becoming an admiral. That would be kind of the career path for someone who's going to become an admiral. Well, it's not going to happen to Brett Crozier because of the leak of the letter to the San Francisco Chronicle, no matter who it was that caused the leak. So when this all came down and the facts were laid out, I backed Mobley. I said, it's tough, but Mobley did the right thing, because what Crozier did compromised the defense posture of the United States, created a false alarm for sailors and their families. It brought disrespect to the entire idea of following the chain of command. I thought that Mobley basically had to do what he did. Okay, so I've got a call coming in here. Why, my computer is really agua today, Real Joe Cruz.
I don't know why, sir.
Yeah.
It's Jack, sir. He's holding.
Jack's on the line. He must have sabotaged my computer.
Probably, sir.
Okay, we'll go into the home stretch, and then I'll pick up Jack.
Cocoa Coffee Company is now available at Circle K. Single origin coffee beans, carefully sourced and locally roasted to give you the freshest cup of coffee Guam has to offer. Grab a cup that's brewed every 30 minutes or purchase a bag of the locally roasted whole beans. Flavors now serving: light medium roasted Ethiopia and medium dark roasted Jamaican Blue Mountain. Exclusively available at Circle K. With every Cocoa Coffee Company purchase, a portion of the proceeds will go towards the Cocoa Recovery Program.
One of the easiest ways to prevent the spread of COVID-19 is to wash your hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Let this message help you time it. Start soaping up now. If you're sick or caring for someone who is, wear a surgical mask or N95 respirator when you're around others. If you're not sick, wear a washable cloth face covering in case you're an asymptomatic carrier. Don't touch the front of the mask and always remove it from the back. When you cough or sneeze, use a tissue or your upper sleeve, not your hands. Choice Broadcasting reminds you to stay safe and stay clean. You can rinse now.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
So here we are coming down the home stretch. So, Jack, I got to finish up this piece on Thomas Mobley, and then I'll pick up. So I ruled in favor of Mobley. I said under the circumstances, he did what he had to do to maintain good order and discipline. But he didn't leave it alone. He came to Guam yesterday, flew all the way out here to grab the squawk box on the Teddy Roosevelt and give a speech where he said that that Crozier was either very naive or very stupid. Well, point number one, people in the chain of command don't degrade those in the chain of command above them or below them. You don't say, if the officer can't even tie his shoes, you don't say in front of the men, this guy is so inept, he can't even tie his shoes. And Mobley is full-time as a naval officer himself. He's a West Point grad. So he knows that. So when he said that was really, really bad. And then he comes along and he tells the crew why they shouldn't be so enamored with Crozier. And he goes into all of these things that I just finished talking about with the crew on the squawk box. Now, he is the Secretary of the Navy, an extremely high-ranking person in the Navy Department. And who is his audience? His audience is seamen. E3s, seamen, petty officers, junior Navy men. Most of the people who were listening were junior Navy men, enlisted men. Now, when I say men, I don't want any feminists out there saying, well, there are women on that ship too. Okay? So he was talking to junior enlisted people. Now, if you understand the chain of command, you know that there are some kinds of communication that don't go from general to private. That's why the Navy has chief petty officers. The chief petty officers ride herd on the enlisted men. And if you're going to communicate certain kinds of messages with the enlisted men, you do it with your chief petty officers. You don't have the Secretary of the Navy come in and saying, you guys don't know the first thing about swabbing a deck. And that's basically what Mobley did. So he screwed it up so bad that I'm ready to call for his removal, even though I was with him with respect to the way he handled the whole Crozier affair. He showed that he does not have the kind of judgment that I want to see in my Secretary of the Navy. And he's the acting Secretary of the Navy. He should never become the permanent Secretary of the Navy. You got a gavel there, Real Joe Cruz? Yeah, that's my ruling. Okay, Jack. No appeal from my ruling, so you have the only option available to you is to praise the ruling and saying, as usual, Bob, your ruling is perfect.
As usual, Bob, your ruling is perfect.
Good call,
I'll waste
Jack.
time on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday I gave you a quote from Mark Twain that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. I think the same thing goes with Hollywood. I was in the Air Force, but I think, like you said, there's a basic the UCMJ and there's the chain of command and stuff that runs through all the branches. But there was a movie called Crimson Tide. Do you remember it?
I do.
Yeah, and so it doesn't sound the same, but the problem and the plot is the same. Where there's a division up there in the front and the head, and then it trickles down to the crew. And if you watch the movie, you know how it ends up. So it was a good movie. That's my take on it. But I called also about you mentioned about the article on the PDN about the staffers and the picture of the staffers not complying with the 6-foot executive order. Do you remember? Lieutenant Governor Madeleine Burdell, you remember that time she did that drive along? Or drive, what do you call it? Drive along when you ride along with the police department. And they pulled over her own staffer for drunk driving. Do you remember that?
I don't, but that's a good story, Jack. Tell us more.
Yeah, so anyways, it was years ago, and when she was a lieutenant governor. So she did a ride along, to see what happens at night. And, they pulled over a drunk driver, and one of them happened to be her staffer. Well, to make a long story short, the staffer resigned before the weekend went through, and, the story went away. It wasn't the first time that a staffer had a problem with Madeline. When she was in Washington, I think her staffer got in trouble with some sort of sexual molestation.
I
or whatever.
remember, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so that was the second thing that happened with one of her staffers. I think he was the chief of staff at that time. I'm not sure. So he resigned. So, we see what should happen. And it probably should have happened in the course of what happened in the Navy also. There should be some, sort of where people don't lose face. I guess that's the only prognosis here. But when you have something that is egregiously in error, in other words, the governor made an executive order, the staffers didn't obey, and then nothing comes about it, and then we are supposed to follow it. Like you said, there's a problem. There's a problem with leadership. There's a problem with authority. There's questions, about, hey, maybe these numbers are wrong, or maybe the administration isn't telling us everything. And, it just leads to more confusion. It leads to more doubt. And then you have problems with solving problems because you don't know who to believe. You don't know what direction to follow. You don't know who's right or who's wrong. And so, this is a big problem. And but what I'm amazed at is that this comes out, and like you said, whoever said that this is a personal problem obviously has no historical experience on how to deal with discipline within the ranks.
It's Janella Carrera, and she's making $75,000 to come up with this line: "We don't comment on personnel matters."
Yeah, so I'm not.
Jack, for about $25,000, you could hire someone who would say, "The governor takes this matter very seriously, and it will be dealt with in an extremely serious fashion."
True.
And not, "We don't comment on personnel matters." God.
Yeah, I don't think you need a paying staffer to say to print those words either.
Really?
You just need someone to know how to operate a copier machine.
Exactly.
But what also surprised me is that over the weekend I got this thing over WhatsApp from the press corps, from what's his name, the malfunction guy, Chris Barnett.
Sure.
Yeah, complaining about why the lieutenant governor isn't doing these things. Now, if he was a student of the Tall Tales, he would know that many, many years ago we already spoke and talked endlessly of what the lieutenant governor's job is. And that's to hold the seal.
That's it.
That's it. So when Chris Barnett, I got that, and he was complaining I said, oh my gosh. This is a problem. It's a journalism thing. It's the media don't know what the proper questions are to ask. They're asking the wrong questions. It's like they're just taking notes, and then it ends up on the newspaper with no sense of making sense of these numbers or making sense of what the executive order is. It's like if I wanted a bulletin, I'd apply for a bulletin. But if you're going to print the news, print the facts, who, what's, when, and where, you should do that. And it's like that, they're getting things confused with the who, what, when, where, and how. And it's just, and if they're confused, can you imagine how we are out here? But, most of us aren't really confused. We know what's going on. We know what to do. It's just that we need also leadership to respond. If the leadership shows leadership, we will respond as public. But
once again, Jack, we appreciate your leadership taking us right down to the end of the program today.
All right, Bob.
Thanks for calling. Thanks for calling. That brings us to the end of another perfect day here on Tall Tales. The real Joe Cruz and I will be back tomorrow. We'll see you then.